Hello and welcome to the second lecture of Government and Politics. Today we are going to talk about the historical development of government and politics. I am Muhammad Tahmidul Islam, lecturer, Department of Law, World University of Bangladesh. Our topics of discussion today are the prehistoric government system. In this part, we are going to talk about what government looked like when the primitive societies were in the planet. And then the government and politics in ancient Greece. So the Greece is said to be the birthplace of democracy and the modern political system. So the ancient Greek politics is also important for us to learn about the history of the political theories. And then we are going to learn about the Roman system of government, which is also an important aspect of the history of politics and the governmental system. So these 3 points are going to be discussed now. The prehistoric government system. So not much is known about the ancient human societies and their power structures, because in those times people were preoccupied with just survival. They did not have a lot of means to write down what their system was, what they thought, and everything. We can only see some cave paintings, and in certain societies there were certain developed scriptures, but those are mostly religious and not governmental. However, archaeological data indicates that the first human societies were consisted of a few hunter-gatherer families and who banded together for survival. So people used to create small families, and some small families came together mostly inside certain caves where they remained, where they lived, and they hunted for food, and they gathered fruits and plant-based foods to survive. And in that structure, there were no governmental system at all. After agriculture was invented, after the invention of agriculture, people started to settle down on riverbanks and form tribal communities. So when agriculture was invented, people had to settle down in a certain place because agriculture takes time. And hunter-gatherers did not know how to settle down. They had to learn. And because riverbanks provide a good source of water, people settled down on riverbanks because there were plenty of water that did not kill them, and water is necessary for agriculture as well. So the land near the rivers are fertile, and that is why people first started to cultivate lands near the rivers. These communities created the first governments. So these settled communities were the first governmental structures. And there were commercial and diplomatic relationship among the tribes, and tribal warfare was common. So in that period of time, villages and tribes used to have their own system of rules and laws, and those were very primitive. And those tribes were fighting with each other for resources. And in ancient Mesopotamia, tribes banded together to create massive irrigation systems, and that improved cultivation, making space for specialization in governance and political affairs. So in the ancient Mesopotamia, which is now in Iraq, we can see from archaeological evidences that in that place many tribes came together, and because they wanted to improve their cultivation, and they understood that in order to improve cultivation they need to work together and form bigger irrigation projects. So that is the actual specialization, and that is the actual founding of a complex governmental system. And then when the cultivation was plentiful, people had the opportunity to specialize in other works other than cultivation or hunting. Therefore, cities were developed with complex hierarchies and power structures. So in that time, we see that there were cities and city-states developed, which had hierarchical powers, which had religious backings and religious power structures as well. So in this picture, we can see that artistic rendition, or what an artist thinks to be a picture of a hunter-gatherer society where a few people are living and most of them are hunters, or they're gathering resources for survival. Now, let's talk about the government and politics in ancient Greece. The ancient Greeks have contributed greatly in the development of political philosophy. Ancient Greece, 700 to 480 BC or before Christ, consisted of independent city-states, and they experimented with different types of governments, for example, democracy, monarchy, oligarchy, etc. So, democratic system was first implemented or practiced by the Greeks, and also the Greeks used monarchy, oligarchy as well in many of their city-states, where they experimented that which kind of government is actually better. The development of democracy was one of the greatest contributions of the ancient Greece, even though citizenship and voting rights were limited only to men with military training. So, Greek democracy was not exactly like the democracy we see today. It was based on military trained men who had the power to control the government, and they had the ultimate say in the governments of the Greek society. There were three bodies of the government in Athens. Number one was the assembly, number two was the council of 500, and number three was the courts. So it was sort of like the modern government equivalent, where we have the parliament and the executive body and the judiciary or the courts. So the assembly acted as the parliament, the council of 500 acted as the executive body of the government, and the courts acted as the courts. The assembly was constituted of all citizens having voting rights. So every single person who had voting rights could be the member of assembly. It was entrusted to vote on new laws and crucial decisions like whether or not they should go to war. So the assembly had a wide range of power which they could use by voting. The council was entrusted with the daily executive activities, and membership was decided by a lottery system so that everyone has equal chance. So the lottery system in the executive body was a unique invention of the Greeks, so that corruption can be in certain ways mitigated, because if there was a lottery and you had the same opportunity, even though you were poor, you had the same opportunity to be a government official just like a rich person, you would be more invested in the governmental system. You'd be more interested in it as well. So that was really a nice touch, I would say, in the governance of Greek society, even though I think in the modern society such a lottery system would not be a sufficient way to choose the executive body. The courts tried individuals and public cases through trials by juries numbering between 201 to 501 depending on the nature of the case. So the courts were the public places where people brought cases under the Greek laws, which could be public in nature or which could be private in nature, and juries were the number of which was 201 to 501. So at least 201 and at most 501 juries in a single case, and they actually voted on the matter, that which person should have the right or which person should be punished or not. And they, through voting, it is a democratic process, by the way, so through voting decided the fate of certain people who came before the courts. So here we can see artistic rendition of an ancient Greek assembly. The assembly had a lot of power, and the voting right holding men were the members of the Greek assembly, and they could vote. So we can see that people are raising their hands, they're voting on a matter. Now let's talk about the Roman system of government. The Roman Republic, which was between 509 to 27 BCE, was ruled by the Senate, consisting of 300 wealthy landowners. So wealthy landowners is a crucial term here. So if you were a Roman citizen, if you did not have a significant portion of the property rights, you could not be a senator. In order to be a senator, you had to be a wealthy landowner. And there were 300 wealthy landowners who were part of the Roman Senate. The Roman Senate was responsible for enacting all laws and collecting taxes for the Republic. So the Senate responsibility was they could create all laws in the empire, and they could also collect taxes for the Republic. There were two heads of the Senate called consuls. So this is also a crucial point to remember, because if there was only one head of the Senate, that head could act like a king. But as there were two heads, one person could veto the decision of another person. So two persons had to decide on a certain fact, and then the decision would be regarded as final or legal. So that was a good invention, actually, by the Romans, that there could be no kings, even though in the Roman history there were many kings. So the consuls, and they were elected by the assembly. So the assembly had the power to elect the consuls. Consuls controlled the Roman legion and selected senators. So the senators were in future were selected by the consuls, and the consuls had the power to control or to order the Roman legion or the Roman army. The third organ of the government was called the assembly, where plebeians or the general people were elected to represent the lower classes. So the assembly was sort of the lower seat of the parliament. They had the power to elect the two consuls, the government officials, and judges. So the two consuls were in a certain way were elected by the assembly, and government officials along with judges were elected by the assembly. So the lower class people also had a certain great power. To better administer conquered lands, Roman consuls appointed governors to collect taxes and control local legions for the Roman Republic. So the consuls, who were sort of like the quasi-kings in the Roman Empire, they could appoint governors in a certain region, and the governor's power was to collect taxes and to order the local legions of the local Roman army for the Roman Republic. So here we can see an artistic rendition of a Roman Republic Senate, where people debated on certain laws, and they elected certain officials. And especially, I mean, the Senate, Roman Republic Senate, is actually empowered to collect taxes and enact laws. And it was the assembly, the lower body of the Roman parliament, that had the power to elect the senator. So there was a balance of power. Those three organs had to work in perfect sync or synchronization in order to properly function the Roman Republic. So this was an interesting topic to discuss. Thank you all for participating in the class and watching the video. If you have any question regarding the lecture content, you can ask in the comment section, and I hope to see you in the next lecture. Thank you all.